Okay, let's go ahead and get started today. Once again, my name is Laura Smith. I am the Assignments and Occupancy Coordinator with the Residence Life Office at William & Mary. And today's webinar is about housing application and contract do's and don'ts for room selection for 2023. I'm going to go ahead and proceed through the slides that we have, and at the end, we'll have time for Q&A. Feel free throughout the presentation to go ahead and type any questions you have into the Q&A here on the Zoom call, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. So why live on campus? What we hear from students, the best reasons to live on campus are the convenience, the sense of community, inclusive housing costs, improved satisfaction with college, and a strong connections with faculty. So what's happening with room selection 2023? So William & Mary is poised to begin an exciting housing and dining comprehensive facilities plan to modernize and revitalize our residential and dining facilities. Over the next 10 years, we will completely renovate or replace 80% of our residence halls, providing housing that is worthy of current and future William & Mary students. By the fall of 2025, we will be adding 900 new beds and more than 400 renovated beds to our inventory. The comprehensive plan will have a rolling impact on housing capacity over the years, and we anticipate pinch points over the horizon. Some adjustments to our room selection process will be necessary in the near term, and we understand those adjustments will be inconvenient. Know that we will support our students and the community through each phase of the facilities plan. So waitlist. William & Mary manages a waitlist for on-campus housing every year. It is something that we anticipate and are prepared to handle. Please see the William & Mary Housing Waitlist page for information on the waitlist process. With the closure of Yates and Monroe Halls for the 2023-24 academic year, we anticipate a housing waitlist of potentially 400 to 500 students. While we cannot guarantee that all students initially placed on the housing waitlist will eventually be offered on-campus housing, in past years we have been able to house all students who actively remained on the waitlist, including this year for fall of 2022. So we are expecting Monroe Hall is going to close for full renovation and is scheduled to reopen fall of 2024. And Yates Hall will permanently close at the end of this current academic year. Dawson and DuPont Halls will house freshmen for the upcoming academic year for 2023-24. So we've also had a lot of questions about same room sign up. With hall closures resulting in fewer bed spaces available for the 2023-24 academic year, the same room sign up process is being temporarily paused so that we can ensure that we have enough space to accommodate the 2-year residency requirement. Same room sign up will not be offered for 2023-24 returning student room selection process. We do look forward to returning to this practice in future years. Additionally, for the commuter contract release, it's been extended to 60 driving miles from campus. It used to be 30, but it's been extended to 60. So who's eligible to go through returning student room selection? You must be currently enrolled, full-time graduate or undergraduate student for the spring 2023 semester, or be readmitted for the fall 2023 semester to be able to apply for housing. If you're unsure about your readmittance process or timing, please contact the Dean of Students office regarding readmission. So also spring study away students are also eligible to do returning student room selection. And keep in mind, there is a 2-year residency requirement. Students in their first 2 years after high school graduation are required to live on campus. So complete and submit your online housing contract. The deadline this year to complete the 2023-24 housing application and contract is 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14th. So all students who wish to live on campus next year must sign the housing contract on the 2023-24 housing application by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14th of 2023. This deadline is the best opportunity to receive a regular room selection time slot. Time slots during traditional room selection week will be based upon high school graduation year. Students who sign a housing contract after the deadline may be assigned a bed space by residence life staff if there is not an active housing waitlist. If there is an active housing waitlist at the time that they sign the contract, they will be placed on the housing waitlist. Those who sign their contract after the deadline will be added to the waitlist behind those who met the initial contract deadline. Consideration of the William & Mary Residence Life Housing Contract. So remember, once submitted, contracts are binding. Prior to occupancy, this contract must be signed and dated or electronically accepted as evidence of acceptance of the terms and conditions and regulations stated in the contract. At the time of signing a contract, if the student is not 18 years old, a parent or legal guardian of the student will be required to co-sign the contract. Failure to check in, pick up a key, or occupy the assigned space does not release the student from this contract. And failure to participate in room selection, check in, pick up key, it's all there. Want students to know twice over that it does not release the student from the contract. So for the period of the contract is for the 2023-24 academic year, specifically the fall and spring semesters, while classes and exams are in session, unless otherwise terminated or suspended under the terms and conditions of this contract. Agreements entered into after the beginning of the fall semester continue in effect until the close of the academic year, which is the end of the spring 2024 semester. So regarding cancellation of the contract prior to occupancy, as a reminder, university policy requires students in their first 2 years after their high school graduation to live on campus, unless an individual exception has been granted. Students who are not required to live on campus have until February 28th from contract acceptance to cancel their housing contract without penalty. After that date, students who have signed the housing contract for the 2023-24 academic year will owe and be charged full room fees. Any termination of the housing contract subject to the terms as listed there in 5, 6, and 7 may qualify the resident for a refund or adjustment to room fees owed. If Residence Life is unable to provide a fall semester room assignment by August 1st of 2023, the student may request cancellation of the contract without penalty. The cancellation policy does not apply to housing assignments for those students who graduated from high school in the last 2 years. I would like to also additionally note that if there is an active housing waitlist, the cancellation schedule will pause through August 1st, 2023. So we do have additional slides here that I'm going to go over that lay out what the cancellation policy is, but I'd also like to refer back to this bottom statement here that says if there is an active housing waitlist, the cancellation schedule will pause through August 1st of 2023. So this is part of our standard cancellation policy for any requests after February 28th, but prior to May 31st. For this upcoming fall semester, we list here the dates for what the fees are for when a student requests cancellation. So prior to February 28th, there is no penalty. March 1st through March 31st, the penalty cancellation fee would be $500. For April 1st to April 30th, the cancellation fee would be $1,000. And if the request was made between May 1st and May 31st, the cancellation fee would be $1,500. So for contracts submitted after May 31st, if a request or cancellation is received within 10 business days from contract submission, there is a $500 cancellation fee. If the request for cancellation is received between 11 and 20 business days from contract submission, the cancellation fee is $1,000. And then on or after 21 days from contract submission, students can no longer request to cancel their contract, but they could request a separate contract release exemption, which is a completely different process. So for contract release exemptions, students are able to submit a contract release request via the housing portal. It is within the housing application. It comes before the housing contract on the application. A release may be granted only to students who demonstrate in writing and with supporting documentation an unforeseen change in circumstances that cannot be resolved in campus housing. Requests are considered on a case-by-case basis, and releases are not guaranteed. If a contract release is approved, the student may receive a refund as outlined per the withdrawal schedule and refunds available on the undergraduate course catalog once checkout is complete. Release request decisions are final. So the information here about cancellation of the housing contract during the 2023-24 academic year, this comes directly from our housing contract, but we find that this information is very important for students and families to have on hand. So for cancellation by the student, so remember, a student who fails to occupy an assigned room will be obligated by the terms and conditions of the contract. A student may initiate cancellation of the contract because of withdrawal from the university. And there it lists that we would have to have notification from the Enrollment Support Services Office, and students will have 48 hours to vacate their housing assignment. And any refunds would be as outlined in the withdrawal schedule and refunds that is listed in the undergraduate and graduate course catalogs. If a student withdraws from the university and re-enrolls during the same academic year, Residence Life reserves the right to reinstate the contract from the date of re-enrollment for the remainder of the academic year. And a student who withdraws from the university prior to the end of the fall semester will not be subject to spring fee charges as long as by the last day of fall semester classes, the student officially withdraws from the university and Residence Life receives confirmation from Enrollment Support Services in writing and subsequently completes residence hall checkout procedures by the last day of the fall semester. So also, if a student leaves university at the end of the fall semester after having completed the requirements for graduation, the contract will be terminated and the student will not be subjected to spring housing fees. If the student is authorized to leave the campus to participate in one of the university's fall credit-bearing programs, such as domestic or study abroad programs, the student may request suspension of the housing contract in its entirety via the housing portal. The housing fees will be suspended for the duration of the off-campus program and then reinstated for the remainder of the academic year when the student is enrolled in an on-campus program. When participation of the off-campus program occurs during the fall semester, the student will be assigned a residence hall space for the spring semester. If the student is authorized for an off-campus program for the spring semester, the student must notify Residence Life by the last day of fall semester classes, and room fees will be suspended for the spring semester. So cancellation by the university. If removal of the student from the residence hall occurs as a result of university disciplinary action or administrative withdrawal, the student will not receive a refund of room fees. The university reserves the right to terminate the contract if the student fails to meet the university academic requirements, in which case the student may receive a refund after the room is vacated, as outlined per the withdrawal schedule and refunds schedule available on the undergraduate course catalog. The university reserves the right to terminate the contract if the student fails to maintain full-time registration for the period of the contract. Termination of the contract is at the discretion of the Associate Vice Presidents for Campus Living and his or her designee. The student may receive a refund after the room is vacated as outlined per the withdrawal schedule and refunds available on the undergraduate course catalog. Additionally, for room adjustments, no adjustments in the charges for room fees will be made because of absence from the university for periods of time during the academic year, except as outlined on the previous page. The university may terminate the contract and the student's occupancy rights in the event of fire, earthquake, flood, hurricane, and other significant weather events or natural disaster, acts of God, strikes, work stoppages, and other labor disturbances, riots, or civil commotions, litigation, war or other act of any foreign nation, plague, epidemic, pandemic, power of government or governmental agency or authority, state of emergency, or any other cause like or unlike any cause mentioned above, whether natural or man-caused, which is beyond the control or authority of the university. In the event of such circumstances, all refunds of housing fees will be offered, it says here, on a following schedule according to the academic calendar for undergraduate classes. To see that schedule, you're more than welcome to check out our housing contract as listed on the Residence Life website. It is anticipated that the current contract will be very similar to the one for 2023-24. We are very excited that William & Mary is able to offer gender-inclusive housing. Residence Life is committed to offering gender-inclusive housing options to ensure inclusive communities. Residence Life offers 2 options for housing preferences based on gender. The first one is single-gender housing, is where students would be having roommates, suite mates, apartment mates, who all have the same sex as listed in Banner. Gender-inclusive housing is students having roommates, suite mates, apartment mates of any gender or gender expression or identity. Gender-inclusive housing does not include single occupancy spaces. Students with medical needs related to gender identity, including for a single occupancy space, should submit their request and related documentation to Student Accessibility Services by the deadline listed on the accommodation selection page. And I can tell you that date is February 6th of 2023. So important things to keep in mind with gender-inclusive housing. Gender-inclusive housing is about who you specifically want to live with, not what building you would want to live in. Students selecting gender-inclusive housing should plan to live with a roommate. You will not be able to search for a roommate who does not have the gender-related housing preference as, you will not be able to search for a roommate who does not have the same gender-related housing preference as you. That means that if you select single gender housing, you will not be able to search for roommates who have selected gender inclusive housing, and vice versa. So if you've selected gender inclusive housing as your housing preference in your housing application, you will not be able to find students who selected single gender housing. So Residence Life cannot guarantee that there will be enough options to grant all student gender inclusive housing preferences. In the event that Residence Life is unable to accommodate the request or the student does not select a roommate, they will be assigned a roommate based off of the single gender housing preference. Gender inclusive housing is completely optional, and all students selecting the gender inclusive housing option must carefully read, accept, and understand the expectations listed. Gender inclusive housing is not intended for and is highly discouraged for romantic couples. However, students will not be asked their reasoning for requesting gender inclusive housing. So for gender inclusive housing eligibility, students must be at least 18 years old at the time of the request. Each individual student must be eligible for on-campus housing, and groups and living units cannot mix undergraduate and graduate students in gender inclusive housing. I would like to add that if there's students who are under 18 that would like to seek gender inclusive housing, we ask that they email myroom@wm.edu to chat about what possible options that there might be. So locations for gender inclusive housing. So these are the same as we had last year. For groups of 2, there's limited spaces in Hardy Hall. There's also spaces in Ludwell and Richmond Hall. I'd like to add on here, there's also spaces in One Tribe Place. So groups for 3 students would be a limited number in Landrum Hall and then also in Ludwell Apartments. So also groups of 4 students would be able to select into Tribe Square, the graduate complex, or any 4-person suite across campus. Housing for 6 students would be available in Nicholas Apartments and Landrum Hall. And also keep in mind, students accepted into the living learning community, including Africana House, Mosaic House, Language Houses, CW House, and the students with approved medical accommodations will also be eligible for gender inclusive housing. For graduate students, we do list here, there are 3, 4, and 2-bedroom apartments at the graduate complex. The entire graduate complex is eligible for gender inclusive housing. So our next space here is for special interest housing. A variety of special interest housing is available here at William & Mary. They include the Africana House, which is located in Landrum Hall, the Mosaic House, which is located in Hardy Hall, the Colonial Williamsburg House, which is located down in Colonial Williamsburg. It's very exciting. It's for 2 students that live there and run programming there. And then also the language houses, which are the Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Hispanic, Italian, Japanese, and Russian houses that are spread across Landrum and Hardy Halls. Please keep in mind that to apply to live in these locations with these programs, the deadline is February 1st of 2023 to submit a Living Learning Community application to the advisor or program. There is information and links on our website for special interest housing, and we'd be glad to answer any questions that you may have by emailing myroom@wm.edu. So accommodation housing. There's 2 types of accommodation housing. The first one's medical accommodations, and the second is religious accommodations. And so those students with an approval for an accommodation and for accommodation housing selection will select their rooms on February 21st and 22nd of 2023. So for medical accommodations, all medical housing accommodation requests must be made to the Student Accessibility Services Office. Residence Life staff is not equipped to evaluate medical information, so we defer all requests and approval requests to the Student Accessibility Services Office. So February 6th of 2023 is the deadline for returning students to submit fall 2023 medical requests with the Student Accessibility Services Office. Even if you have a medical accommodation on file this year, you must resubmit your medical accommodation request for approval for fall 2023 to request an active accommodation for the 2023-24 academic year by the February 6th, 2023 deadline. Please note that if you're a returning student in a residence hall with a window unit, you will not be added to the returning student accommodation room selection process, as all upperclassmen halls have cooling systems. If you require housing accommodation approval because of a medical need, please contact the Student Accessibility Services Office, which is housed within the Dean of Students office. For religious accommodations, requests will be considered on a case-by-case basis according to documented need. Following a thorough review through the Dean of Students office, the office will make recommendations as appropriate to the Residence Life office. The deadline to submit those requests is February 6th of 2023 for all returning students requesting fall 2023 religious accommodations. There is a link to make that religious housing request on the Residence Life website under accommodations. One of the big questions we get is, are there singles available for sophomores? The single rooms are rarely available for sophomores to select during the room selection process. Singles sometimes become available during the academic year, and sophomores can submit a room change request. And that room change request process opens June 2nd of 2023. I'm going to go ahead and access the online room selection timeline and go over the points there. So this is found on our website for Residence Life. You can see here, it's just on the Residence Life website under housing, room selection, housing assignments and contracts, and then room selection. And then we're here under the returning student room selection area. So on our calendar, we have today, which is our information session that we're presently at. And then the housing application and contract go live at 9 a.m. on Monday, January 30th of 2023. Wednesday, February 1st of 2023 is the deadline to submit Living Learning Community applications to advisors and programs. Monday, February 6th of 2023 is a deadline to submit medical and religious accommodations. We will be holding a Roommate Connect Social on Tuesday, February 7th of 2023. And then here The deadline to sign the housing contract is 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14th of 2023. And the information here on the bullet points is reflected earlier in the presentation today. Most notably, students need to apply for housing by the deadline to have the best opportunity of receiving the regular room selection time slot based on their social class during traditional room selection week. The next important date after the deadline to accept the housing contract is Thursday, February 16th. So students who signed the 2023-24 housing contract by the 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14th of 2023 will be emailed this evening, the February 16th, with one of the following. They will receive a time slot day and time notification. Students required to live on campus, graduate students, and non-waitlisted rising juniors and seniors will receive their room selection time slot information email. The other group would be waitlist notifications. As Residence Life anticipates a 2023-24 housing waitlist, rising juniors and seniors who are randomly selected to be waitlisted will receive a waitlist informational email. And then there's also a link on this page for the waitlist page itself. So actual room selection starts on Tuesday, February 21st with our living learning communities making selections. Also that day starts our accommodation room selection for medical and religious accommodations, and that process continues into the following day. Fraternity and sorority room selection occurs on February 23rd, and then the following week, starting on Monday, starts the seniors, juniors, and graduate student room selection, and this is the traditional selection. So on that day, seniors will go first, and then juniors, their time slots will come after the seniors. And then graduate students will be spread throughout the day. So as note here, roommate groups will make a selection between 9 and 3:30. This also includes students who are possibly seeking singles. They can also see if there's a single open during that time. For students without roommates or are not students who cannot or were not able to secure a single, they would go in between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m. to select into an available bed space. And then the room selection process for the day ends at 5. So the next day is the first day for traditional selection for sophomores. That's Tuesday, February 28th. We have a large cohort of sophomores, so they're spread across 2 days. Where folks are placed within the time slots in which day, it is completely randomized, similar to the waitlist process. It's just students are put in to a list and it's randomized and students are assigned to one day or the other. So similar to the senior, junior, graduate student day, roommate groups, they'll be going between 9 and 3:30 when their roommate group leader's time slot opens to make a selection into an available space. And then folks without a roommate group will be able to go in between 3:30 and 4:30 to make a selection. And then that same process continues for sophomores on Wednesday, March 1st. For our students who are part of the St. Andrews and William & Mary Joint Degree Program, who are at St. Andrews, have until Wednesday, March 1st to sign their housing contract to participate in the returning student room selection process, as their selection occurs on March 10th. And then on Friday, June 2nd of 2023, the 2023-24 room change request form opens on the housing portal. So step 1, complete and submit your online housing contract. So housing contracts will be available online beginning January 30th of 2023. Those who complete the contract in the 2023-24 housing application by 5 p.m. on February 14th, 2023 deadline have the best opportunity of receiving a regular room selection time slot. Time slots during traditional room selection week are based upon high school graduation year. This includes those seeking special interest and accommodation housing. Students who sign a housing contract in the 2023-24 housing application after 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 14th deadline may be assigned a bed space by residents' live staff if there is not an active housing waitlist. If there is an active housing waitlist at the time a student signs the housing contract, they will be placed on the waitlist. Those who sign their contract after the deadline will be added to the waitlist behind those who met the initial contract deadline. So step 2 is prepare for selection. Many factors come into play as you prepare to complete the room selection process. Take some time to consider your plans, including selecting your roommates, because single rooms are limited. So research your rooming options, learn about self-assigned time slots, and how a variety of factors may affect your final rooming selection. When students contact our office of asking different questions and they're trying to figure out what scenario works best for them, we always remind students, always have plans A through Z. And your group should also have plans A through Z in case their top choices are not available when their selection time opens. So step 3 is the online room selection. Learn what to expect from online room selection before you begin your time slot. We do have guides on our room selection website that take you step by step what to expect and screen by screen for the room selection process itself. So what if I'm applying to be an RA or want to live with one? We advise that if students are unsure if they will be a student staff member or will be living with a student staff member, they should proceed through the room selection process as though they were neither. This way they secure their preferred housing choice in case they are not hired. If a student is hired as an RA and leaves a vacancy in their old room, the roommate group will have through June 1st to add someone on the room selection room change dates. So in light of the fact that we are anticipating a wait list, we are offering some off-campus housing fairs. We want to provide support and information to our rising junior and senior students as they consider housing options for next year. We have scheduled several off-campus housing fairs for students who are not required to live on campus. Our goal is to connect students with property managers and related campus services. We did hold one fair this past November on the 11th, and then there are 2 upcoming housing fairs, one on February 3rd of 2023 and another one on February 22nd of 2023. The time and location of those are both still to be determined, but we will communicate those with students as soon as we have that confirmed information. As a couple of reminders, by signing the housing contract, you're committing to pay for campus housing for the full 2023-2024 academic year. This means you commit before you know your specific room assignment. Please review the contract carefully, including the limited cancellation policies. And as a reminder, this is a legally binding document. Okay, so that is the end of the PowerPoint presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the Q&A. Just give me a few moments so I can read before I speak on them. The first question is, if I am already an occupant of a school housing in fall of 2022, does it automatically qualify me to stay in the room for spring 2023? And will I be charged during vacation if I'm unavailable, period, or leave my belongings? So this is not a room selection question, but students who have their active contract and they live with us during here in the fall of 2022, their contract remains through the end of the spring semester 2023. So we anticipate that they will return to us after winter break to the same space for spring of 2023. And students don't have to remove their belongings over winter break if they're returning to the same space. And if you have additional questions about this current year, please email myroom@wm.edu. Somebody wrote and asked, What percentage of rising juniors and seniors applying to be approved for housing do you anticipate will be approved as opposed to put on the wait list? So because we don't know the exact number of rising juniors and seniors who will be applying, we don't know that exact number yet. But we can say that we are forecasting 1,000 spaces on campus for rising juniors and seniors for the 2023-24 academic year. Somebody asked, can a contract still be canceled without penalty or reason by February 28th? When will the juniors and seniors find out if they get selected for a room or time slot? And does it matter if you're rising junior or senior, or will there be a certain amount of seniors and juniors? And then do RAs get to select their room or get assigned offered based on a position? So the first part of that is rising juniors and seniors can request to cancel by February 28th without a reason. They just have to request it. So students, all students find out whether they've gotten a time slot or been waitlisted on February 16th in that afternoon. So rising juniors and seniors, they'll find out that day if they've gotten a time slot or if they've been waitlisted. The actual list for the waitlist is completely randomized, and there's not a set number of rising juniors or seniors. It's an equal opportunity to be waitlisted, just based on the randomization of the list of students. We have to reach that number to be waitlisted. We just pull from the bottom of the list. And then regarding RAs, it depends on whether or not they're a returning RA or a new RA. We're anticipating that the majority of returning RAs will get to self-select. New RAs will be assigned by residence life staff. Let's see here. So the other question is, what happens if I get a time slot as a rising junior or senior, but my roommate of choice does not? So if you get a time slot and your roommate of choice gets waitlisted, then you will not be able to pull in your preferred roommate. You will need to go through the room selection process as though they would not be living in on-campus housing for the upcoming academic year. You can choose to go through room selection by yourself, or you could choose to go through room selection with somebody else who is not waitlisted. So somebody else asked, how many students can be in a roommate group? In the past years, you could have a group of 8 or 10 and get adjacent rooms rather than suites. Is this still an option? But that is no longer an option. That was an old process called block housing, and that's not something that we participate in anymore. Right now, the largest roommate group would be a roommate group of 6, and that would be to try to select into Nicholas Apartments or Ludwell Apartments. So we suggest everybody at least be in a roommate group of 2, because that is the majority of spaces we have on campus. But there's also opportunities to possibly select a space for roommate groups of 3, 4, and 6. So 2, 3, 4, and 6. Somebody asked, are seniors given some priority and not placed on the wait list since we are the first to sign up? So the waitlisting process happens on February 16th, and you could be a rising junior or a rising senior and be waitlisted. There's no preference given to seniors over juniors in the waitlist process. On the actual traditional room selection week, seniors do select before rising juniors. Somebody asked us to explain the process if planning to live in a fraternity on campus. So there is separate processing for fraternity and sorority room selection. I would ask that if you could please email myroom@wm.edu with any specific questions. This presentation is about general population room selection. Somebody else is asking about language houses. How does that work? Who are qualified to apply? So each special interest program and advisor, they have their own qualifications for who can apply to be in their program. And then those programs provide us a list of who they want to have in their program. And then we coordinate with them to make sure everybody's done their contracts and that sort of thing. So as long as the program has told Residence Life that that's who they want in their houses for next year, and that person has done their contract on time, then Residence Life would work to get them assigned into the space through the room selection process. But for actual what the special interest programs and advisors require to qualify a student, we will defer to those programs to answer that question. Somebody else is asking, do RAs get a roommate, choose a single, or can pull in a roommate, not factoring in waitlist? So RAs can choose their roommate if they are assigned or selected into a space that is a double or a triple. Where they may choose from if they're a returning student varies across campus. And then other students who are new to the RA position, they would be placed in a space. And if they're placed in a space where it's a double or a triple, they would be able or have the opportunity to pull in a roommate. And a lot of that process happens before the housing contract deadline. I would definitely reach out or suggest to reach out to the staff selection group with additional questions about RA placement and RA roommates. Somebody else asked, if I try for a single and don't get one, do I wait for housing to randomly place me in a double, or do I get to select an empty double in my preferred dorm and then be given a random roommate? So on traditional selection, between that 3:30 and 4:30 period, if you were not able to self-select into a single when your time slot opened, you would go back into your housing application to make a selection between 3:30 and 4:30 that day into an empty bed space in an available space. So it could be an empty double. It could be that somebody has already place themselves in that double and you could place yourself in the other bed space. You would have the opportunity to check the profile of the current occupant before you place yourself there. And usually at that point, there's a variety of things still available. It can get kind of tight at the end of the second sophomore day, but we have enough spaces for everybody to make a selection during the room selection process, though it may not be in your preferred location. The last question I have here has to do with RA applicants about when they find out about the position. I would refer you to the Residence Life employment section of our website, as that has more details there, including timeline. Somebody was asking for clarification about gender inclusive housing for 6 students. So I'd have to go back and look at the presentation, but I can confirm that the only spaces for roommate groups of 6 are in the Nicholas Apartments and in Landrum Hall. Nicholas Apartments, they are all 6-person apartments. In Landrum Hall, 4th floor, there are triple suites. So there's not an opportunity for 6-person units in other locations. Okay. So I think that's all the questions that are out there right now on the Q&A. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. If you do have any additional questions, I'd like just to remind you, you can go to myroom@wm.edu to email any questions, and feel free to continue to peruse our website for the entire room selection process. Hope you have a great day.